Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll let people trickle in here. Our webinar will be beginning in just a moment. Just to start off, I wanted to talk about a couple upcoming webinars that we have with COEH. Later this month, on June 25th, we're going to have Monique Hossain from LOHP, the Labor Occupational Health Program at Berkeley. She's going to be presenting on the Research to Practice Toolkit and why community engagement matters as part of our webinar series with California Labor Lab. The Research to Practice Toolkit is a practical guide to help research teams engage stakeholders and share their findings. If you conduct community research in public health in any way, we encourage you to attend. Got a couple upcoming webinars in August as well, and you'll be able to find out more about that at coeh.berkeley.edu/webinars. On behalf of education and research centers throughout the country, we are pleased to present the Industrial Hygiene webinar series. This collaborative effort on behalf of each ERC's continuing education program aspires to provide access to current research supported through NIOSH ERC programs. Unfortunately, as many of you are already aware, approximately 92% of NIOSH was terminated in April, and we need your help. Although we welcome the return of some NIOSH staff members since that first termination dates, severe cuts continue to jeopardize the agency's mission to keep workers safe. These free webinars would not be possible without the support of NIOSH and NIOSH-supported education and research centers. You can learn more about how to support occupational health and safety in the US by visiting this link in the chat. Let me just pop that in here. And also, if you have a NIOSH success story, we would love to hear it. Please email coehce.berkeley.edu. Thank you for being here and showing your support. We're going to continue to show up for workers and do everything that we can to keep people healthy and safe. Today's webinar, Artificial Intelligence Use in Occupational and Environmental Health, is presented by John Moore, MA, CIH, CSP, in collaboration with the University of Cincinnati ERC. Just a few housekeeping items first. You'll be muted during this presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please enter it into the online Q&A box. We will save time at the end of the presentation to address as many questions as possible. We'll also have the chat open, so feel free to use it to participate and join the conversation. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available on the Center for Occupational and Environmental Health YouTube page within 5 business days. All participants who logged in with their registration email for the full live presentation today will receive an email with a link to an evaluation form that will qualify participants for a certificate of completion worth 1 continuing education contact hour. Once the evaluation is completed, you'll be able to access and print your certificate. Now, I'm pleased to welcome our speaker, John Moore. Mr. Moore is President and Principal Consultant of Control EHS in Atlanta, Georgia. He is a certified industrial hygienist, certified safety professional, OSHA authorized trainer, and certified asbestos inspector management planner. He has over 20 years of experience applying environmental health and safety applications in a variety of industries. He is also the chair of the board of the University of Cincinnati Education and Research Center. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Hygiene and Safety from St. Augustine's College and a Master of Science degree in Environmental and Industrial Hygiene from the University of Cincinnati. He has lectured at Morehouse School of Medicine, Spelman College, Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, and Auburn University. He currently serves on the board of directors of the American Industrial Hygiene Association and previously served as president of Georgia local section of the AIHA. Mr. Moore, I'll pass it along to you and stop sharing my screen. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm reminded how old I am now. Let's see here. So I'm sharing my screen, and now I need to get to the presentation part. And I'll hit present. And is that clear for everybody? Do you see that?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, all right. So today's talk and discussion will revolve around AI, um, which is artificial intelligence, and the guidance for occupational, environmental health, and safety professionals. So this is something that I think has been talked about, and if it's not being talked about, it needs to be talked about, and how we use AI because AI is around us. I went out for a morning jog this morning, and I was going through downtown Atlanta, and I came across some Waymos, which are vehicles that don't have a driver. Again, AI. I actually ran across three of them. And of course, I was cautious as I approached them because they don't have a driver and they have sensors all over the car. But I wanted to be mindful of the fact that one day I might be in one of those. We're moving into a different climate as we use technology, but we have to be mindful of how we use it and be very safe in that approach. So when I first thought about AI, I had to go to some iconic movies, The Terminator and The Matrix, because in those movies, AI was not necessarily the uh, celebrated um, comrade in that. It was more or less the villain. The machines are taking over. I was actually looking at the parallel between the Terminator and then what happened with the Matrix. So one was a prequel, and the other one was what was the result of AI taking over. I don't think we'll get to that point. At least I hope not in my lifetime. But I just wanted to have some way of connecting it because this has been around us for a very long time. It's a long time coming. As you saw on the first slide, we had Flintstones to the Jetsons. So we're now living into, I guess, a closer period of the Jetson, and hopefully we won't have to deal with the Terminator or Neo in the Matrix. This right here was a thought that I had when I was working on a paper with some colleagues within AIHA. Bradley King formed a committee, and he solicited some other professionals that had an interest or a responsibility, or some way connected to AI. So we used our collective talents to come up with a paper that has not been published yet. So I'm giving you guys a preview to a paper that has a collaboration of Benjamin Roberts, Jennifer Shin, Wyombe Danga, Bradley King, Kevin Slates, and myself. And then we have some other people that have helped to review us, as well as the AIHA staff. So I think this will be something that you will enjoy when it comes out. You should pick it up, read it, share it with your colleagues. And when we did this, we knew that it would be changing because that's how rapidly AI is changing. We started this in 2024, and we've already seen so many other things happen that is probably in need of an update as of today. So the objectives for the talk today, and I will try to stay close to my time, and if I need to speed up, I will do so. But there's a lot to discuss when it comes to AI. So I'm just scratching the surface. So we're going to do an overview. The bulk of what we'll talk about will be the applications in the workplace and what we can use as tools as EHS professionals. Of course, we'll talk about concerns with AI because we don't want to make sure that it's a safe process that we're implementing. We have some case studies that will be featured in the paper. So I'll just highlight those things, and then we'll end it with some conclusions and possibly some suggestions for solutions. So what is AI? Actually, I'm going to give you, someone sent me something from Chat GPT. I said, let's see what AI is as it relates to what we do. So the definition I got from this is Copilot, I'm sorry. So artificial intelligence refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that can perform tasks such as learning, reasoning, problem solving, and decision making. AI has been developed in various organizations, including such grants like Microsoft, Google, IBM, as well as academic institutions and startups. AI plays a significant role in EHS, OSHA, and EPA, and industrial hygiene. What it says for the EPA is that AI helps monitor pollution levels, predict climate changes, optimize energy consumption, and improve waste management. OSHA compliance, AI assists with workplace safety by analyzing risk, predicting hazards, and ensuring regulatory compliance. And for industrial hygiene, which nobody really knows what industrial hygiene is, but I guess Copilot will make an attempt. So AI enhances the occupational health by detecting harmful substances, improving air quality monitoring, and optimizing protective measures. So I got it right. Okay. Very impressive. But this is what AI is, and we're getting used to seeing it every day. Recently, I went out and purchased some Metas, and I had the, integration of how I deal with AI in my life. So I'm listening to music on my Metas. I'm saying, Meta, what is this? Hey, Meta, take a picture, take a video. And now I'm getting more comfortable with it. I think we all are to some extent. And I would offer the question is, how often have you used AI this week? And it's probably going to be more than what you would have thought. At least in the last 10 years, we've come a long way when it comes to AI and how we are using it in our daily lives. So some of the aspects that we'll talk about with AI as it relates to our profession will be machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision, and robotics. So I think back to when I had a client on the West Coast and I went out to visit their site to do some industrial hygiene monitoring. I think at the time they had some fires going on, so I did some particulate monitoring as well. But as I was walking through, like most of us when we're going to a new site, I was given a tour, and the tour contained technology in 3 different areas. So the first part of the manufacturing process, they had 7 stations. They had 3 people manufacturing this product in that one station. Then the second cell, they had 2 employees and a robot manufacturing the same product. And then the third station was completely robotics, no human interaction. And I thought that was interesting. And that has to be about 8, 9 years ago that I was seeing that. And like most consultants, I didn't get invited back once they paid my bill. That was pretty much it. But I wonder where they are going with that. Have they maintained that 1, 2, 3, or have they integrated more of the 2, taking the 3 out, or are they completely automated with robotics? And I'm sure you probably have the same type of viewpoints that I have as far as how we're changing as far as technology. So one of the things we wanted to address is that, we understand that AI is built to aid us in supporting our directives when we look at, I call this recognize, evaluate, and control health and safety hazards. And again, we're talking about multiple disciplines in different industries. We are still struggling with implementation when it comes to understanding. So that's why this is a timely presentation as we go forth and try to get a better understanding and have more control and input on how we use AI. So if you are a health and safety professional, hopefully you're adjusting to the climate of using AI. I'm certainly having my bumps and bruises as I go across and try to implement it on several stages when it comes to my traditional health and safety background. But what we did with this paper is that we took the understanding that AI is on the rise, and we wanted to make sure that we understood how to practice it in our profession. So AI is defined as computing technology designed to assist with or address tasks traditionally required from human intelligence, and has rapidly advanced with us. So the advancement comes to us as we need to recognize different categories of AI technology, the things that are currently available and what's being developed. We need to understand case studies on how these tools have begun to be implemented and how they serve a purpose for what we do. We need to comprehend the advantages and challenges associated with AI. And finally, we want to begin to plan how to use AI and integrate it in our practice. So it goes beyond the Chat GPT part. So AI can be an ally in what we do, and we need to probably look at it from a reward standpoint, but we also need to understand the risk. So different types of AI will offer us a variety of impactful benefits and beyond what we previously used to use in our profession. So some of the categories would include machine learning that uses data and algorithms to imitate human learning processes, predictive analytics to process and analyze complex data sets, identify trends related to occupational exposure hazards, and offer rapid decision-making processes and assistance. Computer vision and processing that utilizes the still or video images to identify, track, and provide recommendations on health and safety modifications, and complex language models and natural language processing trained to perform tasks such as writing programs and drafting risk communication products. And I say that because we're using that today, but we have to be transparent and we have to be careful how we use those tools. So in our report or our paper, we identified some of the case studies that would demonstrate and describe the application of AI and the types of environments that we may use it in. And even though we're looking at the potential benefits, there are 7 ways where we need to be mindful of what the risk may be. So we must understand that these security threats actively assist in planning and mitigation of results and measures, and that we have an output that's accurate, reliable, and that we don't take any of these tools for granted. So again, this is something where we have to get used to doing the analysis in a different way. But I think there'll be some major benefits that'll come out if we are diligent in our process. So this is kind of a way of using AI. Mark Ames, who at the time was with AIHA, came in one day and he put up this chat GPT and he just started typing in different topics that were related to what we do, and bam, the output was phenomenal. Now, the only problem was that when we started asking it to give us more focused information, it wasn't as accurate as it was with the more broader topics. So this is kind of where we need to have some way of understanding and regulating what we use things like Chat GPT and Copilot for. On the academic side, I was teaching at Indiana University, excuse me, and we had a policy for the use of AI. So we had systems and software that would detect AI, and we wanted to make sure that the students were not using AI as a substitute. So that's another challenge that we're going to have going forward, is how we train our young professionals coming up to not rely on AI, but to use it in an effective way. So if you recall, back when Biden was president, he pulled out a question as far as where we stood on security for AI. And he contacted the National Safety Council, and we banded together to kind of make some attempt to answer that question. Now, since the administration has changed, some of this has been rescinded, but there's still a need for us to go out and figure out the best way to approach using AI in a safe manner. So as of right now, we don't have any real teeth in the game when it comes to the court system or Congress. So we're still looking for some guidance on how we can be proactive to get regulations and regulate the use of AI. And, you can think about recent hacks. I think I was at the airport at Newark and they were canceling flights because an airline had been hacked. Those are some of the things that on a broader scale, we're going to be concerned about, but it still relates to what we use information for and how we want to protect the security and the privacy of our employees. So with that, we still want to make sure that we are having a strategy and discussions on how to use AI and to make sure that the policies are very clear in what the use of AI should be. So me as a consultant, I would never purposely use AI to replicate a report for a client. But if I use some parts of AI, I would at least let the client know that, hey, some of this was generated by AI. Again, it might be a chance that I'm able to take a large data set, and if I use the right algorithm, I can actually comprise and get some helpful and useful data out of it. So I want to be transparent in what I'm using it for. Or even if I'm doing a presentation and using AI, or writing a paper and trying to get some notes from AI, those are the things that we need to be concerned about on how we are, and we continue to be in an ethical provision where we're not doing anything unethical. So with AI, again, we're looking at who it's going to impact. The bottom line is it will impact the employees, but we have to have relationships with operations management and, more importantly, IT, because they know how to push the buttons and make the things go. So learning more about the IT side of it is going to be very important on how we proceed and use AI going forward. And again, some of these systems already exist, so we're not really too far behind in how we're using it. So what are some of the applications that we can use with AI? Well, if we think about how we're using it currently, is that we have a way of enhancing some of our decision making when it comes to taking a large data set and trying to predict risk, improving on data analysis in the different environments that we serve. We have tools like machine learning, computer vision, LMM, and how we transfer that for exposures, simulations, and even communication. But the third bullet point here is the ethical, legal, and data integrity challenges must be addressed. Talking to some of my colleagues, they were of the notion that if you are building something internally, you're probably gonna have the most secure system versus having a third party come in and run your AI system. But some of us won't have that capability, so we need to have provisions and security in place so that we don't have any misuse of information. The continuous learning of AI is going to help us to do our jobs better, so we're not going to be replaced. I get that question often. Do you think AI will replace us? No, I don't think so. Not in this profession. Of course, there will be some shift of careers and different jobs that may be eliminated, or may see a reduction, but I don't think we'll be replaced, at least not in the near future. Knock on some wood. But again, we want to make sure that we're responsible in our adoption of AI, because it is very innovative, but it can be scary. But we see some benefits on how it's going to help us with our overall program management. Say, for example, using AI to assist you will help you be present when you may not be present. So if you're able to use AI to do monitoring of certain situations, if you're able to use AI to assist you with report writing, is that many of us wear a lot of hats, and a lot of times it's just one of us, but the job may call for 3 people. So AI should be able to help us with some of these efficiencies. Some of the roles that we've looked at as far as how we are adjusting to using AI is that big data sensory technologies, changing the work dynamics, where it requires us to understand the role of AI, the automation, and the implementation of AI, because there may be some exposures that we're not seeing today that we may see later on. It definitely supports our strategies by helping us identify those new hazards. And that, again, that's going to be at a more rapid pace when you can have AI go in and review safety data sheets and pull out the different hazards. And you can look at it from a larger scale where you won't have to do as much of the mundane task of looking over 16 sections of 200 safety data sheets. It'll help you collaborate and deliver safety information more effectively. At least that's the goal, right? So again, a part of the big data analysis is going to be using machine learning, using it as a statistical tool to give you the insight. But a part of what's going to really drive this is going to be the algorithms that we use and how we design it. So I'll get a little bit into that later, but making sure that we have data that is protected. So we want to have security, and for anything that we're collecting, if it's something that we're not aware of, a possible breach, we want to act on that as soon as possible. Machine learning engineers will help us develop a lot of the information, but we'll talk about how bad data will get you bad results. So having a relationship and probably educating some of these different occupations on what we do and how we work is going to be important because they'll be designing a lot of the software that we'll use and continue to use. We want to make sure that we're looking at things such as repetitive tasks. We're looking at how we can reduce exposure to toxic elements. But when it comes to mental health risk, I think that that's going to be a challenge. Like I go back to that story that I had when I was out in California and I had the 3 cells. We had employees working by themselves in one cell, employees working with a robot in the next cell. And then that third cell was probably going to be the cell that was of most concern because that was going to be the robot working by itself. So if you think about the mental stress of having to perform a task that could possibly be replaced, how do you actually keep up with that? What type of frame of mind would that put the employee in? And would they put themselves at risk in an unsafe manner by trying to keep up and outdo a machine? I just got a drone. I haven't opened the box yet to look at it, but I can definitely see the benefits outside of my leisurely taking pictures and videos of using a drone. And these are some examples that we have that where the cameras and sensors can be used in a hazardous environment. You think about fires, you think about confined spaces, you think about using these drones to transport radioactive materials, agriculture use. It can be applying pesticides. So we're taking the human element out of it, and that would be a form of substitution and engineering controls as far as using a hierarchy of controls for me. Is that if we can eliminate the risk, then we're doing our job to do just that. And
John, if there's sound, we're not getting the sound right now, just so you know.
So again, those are some examples of where we could actually benefit by having more drones available when we have emergency situations occur. I was in school and a guy, Dan, and I worked on this project where we looked at the exoskeletons. So that picture, we found a lot of benefits, but in doing that assessment for a paper, we also saw where there were some gaps that needed to be improved on using wearable technology such as the exoskeleton. But if you think about things that we have currently, I have an Apple Watch and it's tracking my steps. It's telling me when to get up. You also have technology that's monitoring your sleep, your body temperature. If anybody's been at Orange Theory and worked out, they have that orange zone that they want to keep you in. So we have technology that we're using to monitor individuals. Um, so we still may have a similar exposure group, but we may need to have more integrated systems to look at how the people are responding because everyone's different. Well, that right there is going to definitely be a situation where you want to keep some of that data private and not share it with folks that could use it in a harmful way. Again, looking at robotics is that we have some other issues on how to control, even some safety issues that may be machine guarding and lockout, tag out, and making sure things are going to be safely used because when we're approaching these situations, there could be more than just the benefits that they're being used for. It could be some other safety hazard that are more on the traditional side that we need to be aware of. So I see a lot of programs being written. I see a lot of training being done just so we can get used to being in an environment where we're sharing it with robotics. Again, just some of the benefits of using an exoskeleton when it comes to lifting and the different types of exoskeletons, the different sizes. So all these things need to be considered from an ergonomic standpoint, just as well as the benefits that you may get out of that. And the different sensors. Again, I go back to traditional industrial hygiene where we're sampling and we're looking at information due to exposure from similar exposure groups. Well, when it comes to getting all this data, how do we actually improve the programs? How do we deliver something that's going to help the employees? So we need to use AI to assess a lot of these hazards. And what it's going to give us is more information that we can make better decisions based off of that. So we're still looking at things such as Bayesian statistics and how we can actually use information to form scientific results that will lead to better recommendations. Machine learning and predictive analytics. Here's where we're talking about one of the three inputs on how we use AI is that we want it to mimic our decision making. Of course, if it's a situation where it can improve, we still want to have input, because without it, we could see something that would be very dangerous when it's actually making more decisions based off of its own analytics. So in hindsight, make sure you stay connected to the tools that you're using so that you can know the limitations and what those things may look like for potential issues. But there's major benefits when it comes to hazard assessments, risk prediction, that hand in hand, we can effectively use this information to get better at what we're doing right now. I personally like this, the VR, and using that to simulate certain conditions of training, things that may be a more hazardous nature, that we can have that scenario when folks can put on the VR and they can use the virtual environment to safely work, but also be trained in a fun way. It's not the same as going through a PowerPoint presentation. It gives you a little bit more skin in the game, and it makes it more realistic when it comes to simulation. But we're doing this now. At Indiana University of Pennsylvania, they've actually implemented this as part of their training for their safety science students. And again, looking at things that we have as far as how we're addressing PPE and getting to spills, the biomechanical monitoring that we're using for ergonomics. Some of these things are going from studies where we're able to have wearable technology and we can predict weight, repetition, and it may even be an advancement of the NIOSH lifting equation that can be put into practice. And that's something that we really haven't been able to do in a lot of our professions, where we're able to look at something on a computer screen and make some decisions based off the analytics and what's being measured. So I see that as a game changer when it comes to how we can look at our workforce and protect them from ergonomic injuries. Here, I like this one because it's identifying who's not wearing PPE. So as you can see, they're going around and AI from a camera is going to identify who's not wearing PPE. Even here, another version of that. So when you have programs and you're trying to enforce them, AI is going to assist with that. I like this one too. So there's different ways we can integrate the technology here. So when we're looking at the different programs that already exist and we're trying to implement them, we need to have a fine understanding of what it is that we're working with, especially if you're trying to take large data sets and reduce them down to recommendations, is that you want to make sure that you are having the right algorithm to predict the outcomes that you should have. So in that same light, we also need to be aware of what it is that we're changing and how that may impact the holistic well-being of our workplace and our employees. So these are some things that we should consider, but there are major benefits that kind of go into this too. We talked about wearable technology and different monitoring devices, is that it may help on the wellness side to protect employees from, health hazards and also other issues that they may have personally. But we have to be very careful on how we use that information. So some of the concerns with AI, and just to keep in time, I'll go over this pretty quick, is that there's definitely a concern with the increase in risk with AI, because simply what I see on my phone is that it's always listening. It's like Big Brother from 1984, is that it's involved in so many processes that you have to be careful on how we use it. There's restrictions that some people have with using it on meetings, Chat GPT. Your phone will say now recording. Like I said, some of the other devices that we're using is that it could be an invasion in privacy, but it also could get hacked. So we want to make sure that we are aware of that. The integrity of the data. Again, we have to know the fundamentals of what we do to use AI in a responsible way. So we want to make sure we have clean data that's comprehensive. That may include us going out and doing an exposure assessment where we take as much information that we can on that process so we can feed that information into the machine and get some reliable data. So very careful on how we use this information when it comes to data analysis. Ergonomics, for example, would be something where we're looking at if we have more situations where people are not moving, that's going to ultimately lead to more musculoskeletal disorders. As you guys know, 33% of the workforce is plagued with sprains and strains. And AI, whether it's on your phone or your computer, it can definitely lead to more of that because you're not moving around. You're probably more likely to have eye strain. And if we're falling asleep with our phones next to us, then we're not getting good sleep. But there's a positive side, is that it could encourage you to make more movement and to get into a healthier habit of using things around you that are not so much keeping you in a stagnant posture. So the garbage in, garbage out problem, as I talked about, is that the problem here is that only 37% of the companies have succeeded in improving data quality. That is really alarming. 37% of these companies are taking these big data sets and they're finding success, where the more issues that we see are the fact that we're not really getting data that's quality. So if you're taking data from a historical standpoint and trying to implement it into AI and you're missing certain cells, you may actually come out with some data that's not really good, just because the process is not refined to where it's going to account for what's missing. So again, the designing and modeling is going to be really important, that you use good analytics and that you understand what those limitations are when you try to get input from the data that you're using. Okay, the infrastructure again is that we need to have hardware. Right now, using AI might be very expensive because we don't have the system set up, and we're going to need more infrastructure along the way to be able to use AI in a more practical way. Looking at the bias, this right here can hit on several different areas where you're having bias from what AI is interpreting. And again, this is where we want to have some connection with the information that's being delivered. They use the example here, but I was talking to a friend of mine in HR, and she was saying that there may be some bias where how people are being hired now. It could be age discrimination or race discrimination or gender discrimination, just because AI might have an algorithm that's, and maybe not purposely, but it could be kicking out certain people based off the data they're presenting. So we got to be very careful on how we use this, and that we don't have bias introduced into AI. And most of us will expect that it wouldn't be any bias, but at times it could be something that we need to take a look at and ensure that that's not happening. So this is some of the research. I just wanted to put this out here because we're not the only ones looking at AI across the world. There are different collaborations that have started to look at AI and how they can be implemented in the health and safety. Here in the U.S., NIOSH had a program, and with the current state situation, I'm not sure if they still have that program, but they were definitely making some inroads when it came to AI, and some of the information that I have, because Bradley is an employee of NIOSH, probably came from them. Case studies. I'm going to go through a couple of case studies here just to show you that we have current solutions when we see these problems. So we're looking at data from an exposure standpoint. Sometimes using a machine learning can combine the exposure database with the HR data. So if we're talking about a similar exposure group, folks that need to have information communicated to them, then this will be a one way to do that without having to call people and maybe get the wrong information. So it's going to improve the exposure estimates and enable better EPI studies where we're looking at workers for health and risk assessment. Okay, this other one is going to be talking about musculoskeletal disorders, is where we're looking at processes where AI can take wearable technology and capture the movement. And if we're doing lifts that are not going to be beneficial, this right here might have a twofold benefit, as it's probably going to lead to faster production. It's probably going to cut out some risk from musculoskeletal disorders. And in the end, it should help the whole process. But think of how you would need to communicate this to the employee. You know, you're putting wearable technology on them and they're trying to work, but you make sure that they're aware that it's going to benefit them in the end. And it's not going to be anything that's going to contribute to them losing their job, for example. I'm doing time. Okay. Manual recording chemical exposures. You know, as we talked about before, is that we're using photos and videos to help develop safer ways to do the job. Even when it comes to evacuations, is that AI can help us in determining the best route for response to a spill or evacuation. Conclusions and solutions as I end this talk. These are some basic terms where we need to be very strategic on how we implement AI. We have to ensure that the data quality is still there, and we still need to address some of the privacy concerns, especially as it relates to HIPAA and other employee rights. We want to keep the leverage of AI to help us enhance our risk assessments. But again, when it comes to communication, we're probably gonna have to lead that discussion because this is something very new that we're getting used to be quite honest. So some of the recommendations that we have, and this was based off the paper, is that AI is rapidly evolving. We need to make sure that we are very intentional on how we use AI in our business and personal life. There are benefits there. We need to be strategic on how we navigate because the world is changing and we want to be at the front, not in the back. Our role is going to be that we still need to be out here on the front line, focusing on the safety and health of our employees. So we welcome more people to contribute to proactive implementation of AI, to share your stories on how you're using AI, to see what the benefits that you may find. And if you have challenges, to reach out to your peers as we're still trying to figure this out. Everyone is in the infinite stages of trying to be better at our profession and incorporate AI with it. I was at a meeting and this was an approach that I thought would work well when it comes to AI because, of course, there are strengths. So we listed some of the strengths here. We also listed the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that is the SWOT approach that I would take with AI. So if you're looking to incorporate AI, I think this is a very helpful tool to consider because you have some benefits, some weaknesses, some opportunities, and obviously some threats. This being one of them, algorithms and the black box issue, where you want to make sure that you have information that is going in that can be used not in the traditional programming way, because at one time, you know, we would sit in front of these computers and get on an Excel spreadsheet and put all the information in there. AI is set up to do just the opposite, give us outputs that we can then judge and make decisions based off of. So we have to change our way of thinking because the information will be there. We just need to figure out the best way to use it. And again, I go into linear regression, Bayesian statistics, and using that to offer some clarity on how we can move forward with the speed of how we'll be able to analyze data. I mentioned the 3 types of learning. The last one, when it comes to deep learning, stay away from that as long as you can. Make sure we have a situation where we're supervising the learning and guiding the principles when it comes to AI, the design of it and how it's being used. All right. Simply said, it's easy to get caught up in the potential risks with AI that it may pose, such as privacy concerns, bias, and ethical considerations. However, don't let it restrict you from exploring and adopting AI's powerful tools. By correctly embracing AI, you can increase efficiency and make informed decisions. I think that's all that I have. These are just some other, I'm getting close to time. And with that, I will say thank you. I appreciate your attention. And I am done with the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Moore, for that presentation. And that feels like a very measured approach to the use of AI in this profession, kind of going back and forth between the pros and cons. I wanted to ask, just before we get started, a couple of people were wondering if you'd be willing to share your slides.
Yes.
And if yes, okay, great. We can coordinate that after, and then people can just email cuehce@berkeley.edu to get those so that everybody has those resources. The Q&A is open. Feel free to ask any questions. Just to get started, you mentioned that coming from a traditional health and safety background, when you were first encountering AI, you had some bumps and bruises along the way and just incorporating it into your work. And I was curious, could you give an example of that? And, you know, for somebody that's just getting started with it, what kind of challenges did you encounter?
Well, I think that the ethical issues that we are faced with, I haven't had much success with AI with the larger scale, but trying to understand it from a data set where I have clients that are giving me all this data and trying to design something that will work for them. But I'm developing a relationship with IT folks to help me in that integration. So, you know, if we're looking at something like hex chrome monitoring, as we know, the standard changed, I think back in 2008, and data from a historical standpoint that was prior to that change may not be something I can use. It may be skewed in a way that I can't use that data. So, you know, just working around some of the issues that I'm aware of and having them design some of the algorithms that I can use to give us some good data.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also just coordinating with the people that know that kind of technology the best and work with it maybe more often than we do.
Yeah.
I had a question from Karthik. Karthik asked, John brings up a lot of salient points regarding the intersection of AI, machine learning, robotics, and humans. How does the AIH fit into the equation? Simply a data and AI prompt engineering manager, question mark, or perhaps something more? I had a feeling you got through this in some of the case studies, but if you had anything to add about the AIH role in particular.
Well, I think the part of the paper that we wanted to be intentional on was to provide some guidance of where you could use it, because, you know, we're across different industries. Somebody might be in the mining industry, manufacturing, R&D, is that we're going to see AI is going to start to appear more often, and we have to be in those conversations. So the document itself and part of the presentation was more of an awareness. We're looking to get feedback. We've already agreed that we're going to have to update this paper and presentation next year. So it's rapidly changing. We just need to be at the forefront of the conversation at this point.
Yeah, definitely. You got to have your finger on the pulse as it just changes constantly.
Absolutely.
In that same vein, somebody asked, as AI becomes more prevalent in safety, what industries do you feel will benefit the most? So you just had mentioned a couple different industries that relate to industrial hygiene. Are there certain ones that you see it being used more and those industries benefiting from it more?
Right now it's going to be transportation and manufacturing. And if you think about it, physically, that's where we see most of our injuries and fatalities. I will also imagine that mining, agricultural, is that when we start to make AI cheap enough to where it can be implemented and replace some of these tasks, I think it'll be more readily to use. So we're still on the cusp of, you know, doing the economic evaluations of what the long-term benefits will be for companies to use AI versus, having employees. But when it reaches that point where we're now changing the demographics of our professions, then I think that we'll have some idea of how widely used it will be. I mean, I don't think it's going to go from now to Star Wars overnight. I think we'll have to have an infrastructure set up to be able to support and safety support. I mean, I was looking at the news the other night, and they were saying that one of these Waymos, which is a vehicle that doesn't have a driver but drives around town, had a fire. And I think back in San Francisco, when they were trying to convert transportation of 18-wheelers transporting products, that they had some issues there. So we're still trying to scratch the surface and get it to where it's a safe and reliable technology that we're using.
Great, thank you for that answer. And yeah, we're very familiar with the Waymos here in the Bay Area. See them all around San Francisco. I had a question. You mentioned like the mental health risk for workers working with AI. It can like bring up this sense of anxiety about, is it going to replace your job? And then competing with the AI and these different cells that you had mentioned. And I feel like that gets to public opinion about AI and, working with workers. I could see how it's difficult, like coming in as a consultant and being so familiar with the issue of AI, and then perhaps working with workers who are not so familiar with it and have a certain perspective of it or certain anxiety. And I was wondering, in studying this, how have you thought about outreach and education? Because, this webinar is a form of educating OEHS professionals and people who work with workers. Have you thought about ways of like disseminating information to the workforce in general and the people that whose jobs might be affected by it?
Yeah, I think that's what when we got together, it's like there's layers to what we want to bring out. First would be the awareness and then implementation. And AIHA has been very good about taking information such as what we did during the pandemic and making sure that we translate it into different languages, because sometimes it's the underserved and the folks that need the information that may not speak English as a first language, for example. Or I think that we're not just stopping what we're doing in the US, but we're trying to get, a lot of people or companies on board that are international. So I think that this conversation will continue to be the topic of discussion for many years. And that would be one of the challenges. If I had to add something to my presentation, that would definitely be one of the challenges. How do we actually communicate to the employee? But we talk about psychosocial concerns, and those are the things that I can see coming up with the fact that people need to provide for their families, and there may be some issues coming about. Hopefully not too many. Hopefully we can actually provide some guidance in that too.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it brings up to, you want to bring everybody along as there's this progression of technology and everything. You don't want to leave people behind, and make sure that they know how to use it, how to integrate it. I had a question in the chat. Do you have any books or podcasts that you would like to recommend to soak in the AI integration within the IH world and industries? You seem to be passionate about this subject. Are there any sorts of content that you like to look at that have helped you understand it?
I don't. That's a great question. Right now, I'm focusing on some of the psychosocial aspects. Dr. David Daniels had written a book, I think last month, and I've been reading that. And it's talked about the suicide rates and how it's going up and how things are changing. As far as technology, I would say some of my colleagues that I listed that helped us in that creation of this product would definitely be better suited to offer that advice. But I will stay connected so I can actually post what may be some great materials and avenues to get more knowledge on AI and how it pertains to our profession.
Great. Yeah, you mentioned Dr. David Daniels. That's his name?
Yes. He
Okay.
put out a book called Psychosocial Safety. It's Real. Yeah. Just put it out.
Got it. I'll put that in the chat for everybody.
Yeah.
Another question from our viewers. Are you aware of any companies who are using PPE monitoring and employees' response to that system? That surveillance, those 3 different examples of like monitoring PPE. Is that just in a test run, or have you seen any companies use it?
I haven't seen it personally. None of my clients are using that. I would probably think that someone on the on the call here may have that at their companies, because I can think of some of the companies that could be using it. I just don't know them by name right now.
Mm,
Yeah.
got it, got it. Another question. With NIOSH workforce slowing down now, what should we reference to in terms of AI safety? You know, these regulatory boards and just the situation that we find ourselves in. How are you managing that, and what should we look to?
That's a big one right there. We're still
Yeah.
trying to find that out. I mean, you mentioned the Save the NIOSH campaign.
Hmm.
Bringing back 338 jobs is definitely not going to be enough to see programs like this that we need to be involved in. I know AIHA and ASSP, associations are trying to come in and bring up some of the things that we don't want to lose. But I think that we're still in the sense of we're not sure where it's going to end. We're not sure where we're going to lose and how we need to replace that support. So I would say just be on the lookout. We're thinking about it. In fact, we're using that same SWOT approach for how we can actually restore some of the programs or save them altogether with NIOSH.
Certainly. I have a question that gets to kind of like the physical element of AI. I hear about these AI data centers where all of like the data is processed, and how those centers in various parts of the country will take up a ton of energy. It requires a lot of energy to even just like get one ChatGPT response. And I'm curious, as an IH expert, have you ever visited a center like that or kind of seen what that looks like?
Yeah, we might have some people on the call that are associated with the data centers. I won't name the company, but yeah, they're coming up and they're popping up. And there's a unique, um, I wouldn't say, well, they have their own safety and health hazards there too. That you're talking about racks that have data that need to be maintained, they need to be cool. So one of the things I don't see happening is that the maintenance and the upkeep of these centers, there'll always be jobs with data centers, going forward. Whether it's construction, whether it's maintaining that, is that I've seen a lot of data centers where they're big, they're enormous, and you're walking through, and the idea is to keep everything online. So that's going to be equally important for years to come.
Gotcha. We probably have time for one or two more questions. From the chat, what are some ways we can reduce hallucinations with AI tools so that they are more reliable, factual, and consistent? I believe hallucinations, that's a certain specific issue with AI. If you could speak to that.
Well, hallucinations, we're talking about physically hallucinations, where are we talking about just the
It's a
misperception
good
of?
question. I would assume it's just like inconsistencies and mistakes that the AI is making, and
Oh,
perhaps just coming up with random information that's not necessarily relevant to the prompts.
again, I think that, the security part of it and making sure we have algorithms that are in tune with what we're needing the output for information to be. But when somebody mentioned that, I thought about a friend of mine who has a navigator, and they were telling me that as a safety feature on a navigator, you can actually have self-driving, but there's a retina scan that will register when you're looking away or when you're blinking, and it'll have a prompt that will, a horn or something, a signal that will tell you to wake up. Another one that I've
Mm.
heard about is that, if they see you swaying or doing something, they'll tell you to, get some rest, get off the road. So there are a lot of safety features that are in our automobiles, for example, that are great AI tools. So we're not sitting here, gloom and doom. Is that I think we're getting a lot of benefits from using AI. We just need to make sure that, especially when it comes to health and safety, that we're not mistakenly using it in a way that's putting our employees and public at risk.
All right, one last question. Any ideas on what AIHA can do to prepare current and future IHs for an AI world? Any final recommendations?
Yes, I think it starts with being involved in AIHA as a student or early career professional, because that input in the pipeline is going to be, it's going to be wonderful to have an exchange of knowledge. And that's the part that we want to be responsible for, is that understanding the history and why we do things, and that knowledge transfer will be equally shared for someone who come in and tell us how we can do things easier or differently. Also at the university level, and again, University of Cincinnati, I've had a similar talk, and I'm sure that other schools are implementing AI, and it may be something that becomes ABAT accredited because it's going to be that important, I believe, that we need to have AI in the curriculum so that students are being taught on how they can use it. So when they get out into the workforce, they're not behind. So hopefully that'll be the case. I'm definitely rooting for that to be the issue at hand, that we can train our employees or our health and safety employees to be better armed with this type of technology going forward.
Definitely, yeah. One of the central themes seems to be education, training, just making sure that people are aware of these new technologies, and that's part of what we did today. And so we're at the top of the hour. I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Moore, for presenting your research, and we'll see you next time at our next webinar.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.